Hey, my name's Craig with Enjoy Stewardship, and today I'm here with Pastor Chuck of Faith Baptist Church. And it's not often that I get to connect with pastors face to face and talk to them. Usually I'm behind the computer figuring out ways that we can serve pastors. So this is extra special for me to get to connect with you, Pastor, and learn a little bit more about your church, your campaign, what made you guys partner with Enjoy, and just what happened. So I'd love to start by just hearing the story of Faith Baptist Church. Like, tell me a little bit, like, what's the background, where you guys come from? Tell me about the church a little bit.
All right, the church started up on the Air Force Base. We're here close to Hill Air Force Base in Layton, Utah. 14 families gathered up there, and strangely enough, it was on a street called Vampire Street. And yeah, kind of weird. But anyway, it just began to grow, and they got a storefront for a few months, and maybe even up to a year. And then they purchased part of the property where we're at now, and began to build their first building. One of the families mortgaged their home to do it, probably gave over 50% of everything that was given. Um, and then a few years later, the husband in that family died, and the life insurance then paid back the home and everything. And uh, but anyway, so then in '84 they built the building that we're currently in, and it started to grow pretty well then. And '99 I came there as the new pastor, and things had begun to wane. I'm not sure why. I have no explanation for that, but it just had started to really wane, and the church had about well, the treasurer told me in 3 months, well, we would have had to sell the building or leave the property or declare bankruptcy or something. And so we started in a tough spot, but God just started blessing, and it started growing. And anyway, we grew really, really strong for about 5 years, 6 years, and then we went through a really difficult time. And since then have recovered from that, and the church is just we're using every parking spot we have. um, we're very, very crowded. I know most churches would go to two services, but we will if we have to, but we're a church that likes to be a church. We like to assemble together, and it just
Yeah,
doesn't work very well when we go to two services. So we've built a big overflow room now on the property in the same building, so you still feel like you're right there. and and we'll keep the choir up. We'll do everything we can to avoid two services, but it's just time that we build. It's time to go forward.
yeah. I remember those overflow days, and when you get to the overflow of the overflow, and then you start moving, you got extra chairs, and so I have personally experienced that feeling and that growth, both as an attendee, as a volunteer. Um, Now I'm curious from your perspective, because I think it was probably 2022 or maybe 2023 when, I'm curious what the experience was like for you, in 2022, 2023 when, like, when did you know either A, we need to do something, we need to build, we need to whatever that was. What was that kind of catalyst moment like? And how did you know it was the right time to kind of either take a next step or just have a conversation?
Well, how did I know when it was the right time to have a conversation with Enjoy? um, it's probably a more than one answer. I had built a new building in Oregon, but it was very rural Oregon. And I mean, like the city of Somerville, Oregon, you could look this up. Somerville Baptist Church has about 100 people in it. Today, it probably has about 120 people in it. It's the church I grew up in. I knew the community well, and we built a very, very good, solid, quality building, paid cash for it as we built. Um, and the community got behind it. We had money that I call from across the river come in, like when they were building the temple. Um, Solomon said, "Here, well, the Lord told Solomon everything he needed, but they didn't have everything they needed. But other kingdoms found out and supplied stuff for them." And I watched God do that in Somerville. But I also knew that this isn't Somerville, and this is going to be a normal city type building project where you actually have to have a building permit before you start. We didn't even have a building permit in Somerville till 2 months before we finished the building. But we did call out the inspector at every phase. They were just super slow with their paperwork, and we didn't wait on them. You can't do that here. And not only can you not do that here, you can't build a building for the amount of money that we could just pay for as we go. And so I knew we had to have somebody that has more expertise than I do to guide us through it, to help us understand what's realistic that we could raise, um, and so forth. And we had been bumping attendance numbers that were tough. And while I may have had that initial phone call in 23, I just was learning. I just wanted to know, who to call, or are there people out there that could help?
Yeah.
And when I called back this last time, and Brian Dodd answered, he said, "Well, tell me about what you want." And I said, "Well, this might sound like a crazy answer, might seem like unrelated answer, but what I want is revival." And I'm basing that on First Chronicles 28 and 29. They didn't just build, they didn't just take up an offering to build, they had revival. And you could just almost see him smiling over the phone because he's just preparing for me to quit talking so he can so he can tell me. Seriously, he could just tell he had a big old grin on his face. And he says, "Well, Pastor, you're gonna love this. Our whole process is based on First Chronicles 28 and 29. And you're
Mhm.
not wrong. If God moves like God likes to move, and if your people allow him to move like he wants to move, you'll have revival, and you'll have a new building." So that was really encouraging. And then and that's the answer to that question. We had been pushing numbers. And I think one more thing is this reality that what God's doing for us is way bigger than us. It's just way bigger than us. So we can't keep forcing it. We can't, no matter how hard we work, we could not do this. It's got to be God doing it through us.
Right.
And so this realization that all we have to do is figure out what God's doing and join him in it. God doesn't fail. So if we can figure out what God's doing and join him in it, why was now the right time over 2 years ago? Well, 2 years ago, we were having the same problem, and that 80% rule, once you start bumping plus 80% for parking, for seating, for everything, you just start cycling through people, and that's what we're doing now some, and that's what we were doing in 23 some, and at some point, it's just I can't explain it why God just, said, "Okay, this is what I wanna do. Are you gonna join me in it?" And that just gave us the faith to go forward when we believed that God was doing this. That's
Yeah.
that's the answer.
Well, it's pretty incredible, because we internally talk a lot about, we are constantly looking at, okay, what was that church's goal, right? And a lot of times it's really easy to fall into like the financial, this was the goal of the campaign and we saw this pledge and et cetera. Like that's a really easy thing to track. So you can look at it all the time. But the reality is, and internally we talk about this a lot, there's so much more that we get to see and we get to do on the actual spiritual impact that that campaigns have on people because it's such a big faith step. Not only for
Oh, yeah.
you, I mean, you had to make that decision, right? And your staff, but also all the people in that community, everybody that attends your church.
Yes.
You get to ask them, "Hey, God is calling us here. Will you take the step? Right? Will you cross
Yes.
the river? Will you put the
Yep.
rock down to take that?" And so I know look, there's probably we could stand here for hours and you could tell me the those moments, then what happened. But uh, is there anything that stands out, maybe whether it's from you specifically or your staff or just people in the church, that you're like, during the campaign that these spiritual moments happened. This was the spiritual growth that we saw, because that's really what the goal is. It is the revival. It is what you were talking about.
We did. We have so many that I couldn't even name them all. I
Yeah.
mean, we're talking about genuinely seeking God with all your heart and never having been this close to God before, and I'm wondering, is this as close as you can get, and setting up meetings with me to ask, am I where revival is, or is there something else in my life that God's needing to, I couldn't really answer that for people, but it was really a beautiful thing that so I'm kind of a realist, and
Mhm.
the Bible is very clear that your heart's deceitful and desperately wicked, and who can know it?
Mhm.
And then he tells us two areas that you can look at, that a human can look at and get an idea. And one of them is your words, and one of them is your wallet. And you can tell me with your words all day long how much you love God, but if you don't put God first financially, they're just words.
Mm.
And so financial commitment is spiritual commitment. It's a big step for a lot of people. We're programmed from our childhood that it's all about number one and you're number one, and
Right.
that's all about money. And so you better take care of yourself. Look how much you'll have in 20 years if you invest it here, if you invest it there. And the other thing that I believe is that God takes physical things and temporal things and turns them into spiritual things and eternal things. And I believe that. I believe that. I don't say it and not believe it. I say it and I believe it and I practice it. And so um, my wife and I have committed at a level that you know, people wouldn't know how we could make it at that level, but I know we will, and God's going to take care of us. So for those that had never ever tithed or really given it all, that was a huge step for them. Huge step. Well, I've been doing that since I was able to talk, so I it wasn't a huge tithing's not a step for me. We were already very committed to missions. So many years committed to missions that's not a step for me. I tried to put myself in the same position because I don't believe the Bible teaches equal giving. I believe it teaches equal sacrifice.
Mhm.
And how would I sacrifice as much as this young mother, single mom who half the time can't make it from month to month, but now she's going to step out and begin to tithe? What would I need to do to sacrifice like that? And what that did is that was very spiritual. I mean, because it didn't just stick with me; it moved to our people. I mean, we had people bring in gold, silver, and platinum, and um, just you know look through their stuff and say, "Well, Lord, if you want me to give this much, where is it? How would I do it?" And oh, I've got gold, I've got silver, I've got whatever, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I really do. I think there'll be more of that type of giving. Um, it's so many of the men have come, and people that aren't used to, like, we give invitations at our church still, and people come into the altar that haven't come to the altar in years, and
Mm.
we've seen God begin revival, and it's exciting and it's good. And we're thankful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard not to be, when you hear those stories um, we literally yesterday shot a video on uh, equal giving versus equal sacrifice. And um, because you're right. I mean, that's the call, and that's what a campaign can it offers to people the ability to take that step, which is
Yes.
scary. Like it can be intimidating, and when God calls you to do something, especially uh, when that something could be financial. Because I mean, you know it,
Yes.
we all know it. That's a huge. It's the number one competitor for people's hearts, right? So when you when you start poking that, they
Yep.
can often be like, whoa, whoa. So yeah, well, it's just
Another
incredible. Go ahead.
another thing that I think has challenged our church is, the widow that gave her two mites. She gave everything she
Right.
had. And Jesus said, she just gave more than all of you. And something the Lord showed me a few years ago, I think it's so right, it's so true, is well, how much would they have had to have given to give as much as she did in God's economy? Well, the first answer that pops into your head is, well, she gave everything, they'd have to give everything. But I can assure you that is an incorrect answer. That is not the truth. Because she could replace everything she had by tomorrow noon. That's how little she had. And if some of those Pharisees had generational wealth, they could not replace that by noon tomorrow, right? So, what would it look like if they gave everything they should equal sacrifice? Well, that's your job to figure that out, church
Yeah.
member.
Mm.
That's the question. That's what you have to seek God for. Yes, there's people in this church that could give everything they have and replace it in a month because they don't have anything. But you couldn't. You couldn't do that. You couldn't, if you gave everything you had, you couldn't replace it in a month because you have a lot. So what would it be? What that is your dilemma between you and God. That's what you need to be praying about and asking God. How do I give equal sacrifice with this single mom? I always use single mom for some reason, but there's a lot of other
Yeah.
situations. There's retired folks out there that are just amazing. I mean, the sacrifices they make are amazing. And how do we sacrifice like that? What would that look like?
Well, you brought up Brian Dodd earlier in this conversation, and um, Brian used to always say, I would hear him say this talking to pastors about uh, the like one of the most important moments in a capital campaign in a church is
Sure.
not your Vision Sunday or some of those leadership events and things like that. It's when you get the people, the family in the church around their dinner table um, for that one moment where they can all look at each other and say, "Okay, we're going to pray, and we need to ask God what He has for us."
Amen.
And that moment, he's like, "That is the moment. That is that's what your church is trying to do is get people to have that moment with God and say, okay, I know you're asking me to be a part of this. On what level? Tell me." And he's like, "That's you can get there. Does it like the leaders in your church, the person who comes one time, if they all have that moment, you will have a successful campaign." And from my perspective of talking to Jeff Benefield and talking to Brian and learning more about your church, uh, it feels like you had a lot of people in your church have that moment. I mean, it was
They did.
just a couple weeks ago, right, where you had
They did.
your
Yes.
public commitment.
Re-
So tell me a little bit about that. Just what happened? You've had a public commitment and your church
So
took
what
those
happened with
steps.
our
Yeah.
public commitment? Probably one of the most exciting things that I could tell you is having my own daughters, 20-year-old and a 24-year-old, come talk to me personally about what God's laid on their heart. I mean, if
Wow.
you could imagine our college age, we have probably 35 very faithful college, and we have about 60 in our college group. We probably have 8 college students that committed over $10,000 and each. And you know, some of them already have a second job just so they can give it to the building commitment and to meet their pledge. It's and they're excited about it. It's the Holy Spirit working in and through them, and they're excited about it. They're not going to work, like I have to go do this. They're excited to do it because they're excited about what God's doing in their own hearts and lives. It there's probably nothing that happened at our church that is unusual after you guys have helped 5,000 churches. I probably have no stories that you can't relate to, but for us, it was our first time doing something like this. And to just watch what you say, just watch some senior citizen walk up to the vision board and just look at what could be and just stand there and stand there and stand there and stand there and dream about it. Um, it was powerful. And then go make
Yeah.
commitments. So I guess the high goal, or I'm not sure how you guys term it, but the upper limit of what uh, Jeff Benefield felt that we could expect if things went really, really well was 1,500,000. And so far, our so far it's 1,785,000, I think. And we had a first fruits commitment of 385,000, and and I guess that's unusual right now because it was during the government shutdown that we did all this, and it ended up being about 22% of the total. So I guess that was good. I
Yeah,
we've
that's
never done.
very good. You talk about, yeah, we've been blessed to be able to partner with a lot of churches over a lot of campaigns. Um, One of the things that we would say a lot is like you can't take a cookie cutter approach to campaigns. There's a process that you can take, right, and say we're going to do this process, but you know this, a church a mile down the road from you, culturally, it can be totally different, right? And so to hear um, that you guys had such an impact, not only to raise the funds to do what you need to do, but also on the first fruit side, so you can actually it gives you a jump start. But
Yes.
then one of the things that one of the things that we do um, before we meet with churches on kind of the initial conversation is we've been trying to ask the board members, people in that meeting, what questions do you want us to answer? Like what do you have? What are you worried about moving forward? And one of the things that you just said, talking about the government shutdown, a lot. It seems like here recently, a lot of board members are asking us, um, should we move forward when there's economic instability? Like, should we wait for more economic stability before we launch a capital campaign? Which I think is a totally fair question. But your church, like, arguably in one of the most unstable uh, economic moments, saw this incredible result. So I'm curious as to your answer. Maybe if a pastor asked you that question, hey, should we wait for more economic stability before launching a campaign? What is your perspective, just as a pastor who's experienced it?
So whether you should wait for a more stable economic time before you step out, I think I have two answers. One's a real practical, everyday answer, and that would be if you talk to any dad, if you're a young married couple and you talk to any dad or grandpa, they would tell you that when they went to buy their first home, it was just too much. It was more than you could pay, and they had to make horrible sacrifices to get that house in their name. But it wasn't long before that house was worth way, way, way more. And if they hadn't ever stepped out and done something difficult, they'd never owned a home. I don't think anybody owns a home that didn't step out on some measure of faith, a little bit anyway. Well, that doesn't apply perfectly to our situation, but I've watched churches wait and wait and wait and wait. And then the price of everything is double what it was if they'd have just started 5 years ago, things like this. So it does kind of apply. But the number one thing for me is literally to seek God, and if this is what God's doing, join him in it. He's bigger than circumstances. He can see what you cannot see. It's like Elijah and Elisha. They're surrounded by the enemy, and Elisha's scared to death, and Elijah isn't. Well,
Mhm.
can't you see him? Can I see what? There's more that be with us than they that be with them. If you're on God's side, you're on the winning side. So you just join him in what he's doing. And I think that guides you through the whole process. So we have this building up here that's, if we build it just like it is, it's $10 million. If we build with the builders that we initially got those drawings through, but I think we're going to be able to build almost everything. See, one of the things we did is we got a list of needs. This is what we need. So these needs need to be met,
Mhm.
regardless of where that is, how big the building is. These are our needs, and so that's one way that we presented it to the church is we're committing to meeting these needs because God has shown us these are the needs that we have. So as long as we could meet those needs through a building, the different style building or whatever, uh, we're committed to meeting those needs. We're committing to joining God in meeting those needs. So we probably won't build a $10 million building, but we'll build a new building that'll work and that'll meet the needs of our church. And we have a lot of needs. We're held back with our Christian school doesn't have classrooms it needs. Our Sunday school, we have Awana, but we've never had a room big enough to have an Awana circle. Just all kinds of things that we're
Yeah.
we're really limited. We don't have anywhere for fellowship. We have no building, no place to fellowship. And that's huge. That's a big need that we need to meet, that God wants to meet. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Well, it 100%, it absolutely helps. Well, I think, you honestly led perfectly into, one of my last 2 questions. Well, a lot of times when we'll initially connect with a pastor or church leadership, they'll have that $10 million building, right? And they'll say, this is what we have to do." Um, and not that they're missing the needs, they know what the needs are, but they think that's the only solution, right?
Right.
And it's a hard thing sometimes to say like, "Well, hey, maybe you don't there's another way to do this." And so I think sometimes churches don't know, um, how much they can realistically raise in a campaign. That's one of those fear jumps. Like, can we do this either on the like, can we raise 10 million, or can we raise 1, or can we raise 5? Like, how much can we realistically raise in a campaign? Which again, that's another one of those questions that board members ask us all the time. And
Yes.
I know that you mentioned it earlier. You had a conversation with Jeff Benefield about how Enjoy maybe helped you plan for that, and maybe gave you confidence on like, oh yeah, okay, this is possible, and help that you already had the faith, but then it kind of elevates and says, oh yes, 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 I'm ready to take the step. So maybe tell me how Jeff helped you with that.
Well, Jeff helped us a ton because we'd never done this before. So he had a step-by-step process through the entire process, which gives you a lot of confidence that without a process, how do you get from this month to 6 months later and actually take up a commitment? What do you need to
Yeah,
do for that to go well? And Enjoy has a wonderful step by step. He just gives you all kinds of confidence that if you get hung up anywhere, just call. I can even fly back out. I can come out as many times as you need me, and that's a big help. Um, Another thing is he emphasized early on that this equation does not include miracles. Okay, so this is what you can expect, and the Tuesday after we made these commitments, we were meeting with different builders and with for a different plan that would fit our budget better. And they said, well, if you go that long, you just need more property. So I called our neighbor, which I'd been talking to now for a year or so, and I said, Jeff, that's his name's Jeff too. I said, are you able to come down? And I'm having a meeting with some builders. He said, I can come down. I said, okay. While you're coming down, I just want you to know I'm going to ask you some pretty crazy questions. And one of them is going to be, would you give us your property? And and because this building is going to have to go further north than we thought, and that means we need your property. So be praying about that while you come down, if you would. So he gets down there. We show him. Uh, we have some complications with our property. It's in what's called the accident potential zone, coming off the Air Force Base. By moving further north onto Jeff's property, we're able to get out of the APZ, the accident potential zone, and that's good for everybody. Well, he listened to everything and said, I said, Jeff, what do you think? Are you willing to work with us? He said, yep. If you'll help me, well, what he needs help with is he wants to have a single mom's ministry, um, which is something we've been dreaming about for years, and he wants us to run it. So yeah, it's like, yes, we'll help you. Um, so it was just like the 10 lepers as they went, um, Jesus said, "Go," and when they went, God began to meet those needs. I don't think it's a coincidence that 2 days after we actually go, right? We actually make the commitments. We actually start say, "This is where we are. This is what we believe God's doing through us," that land is given to us. I mean, we've needed the land for 20 years, but 2 days after we made the commitment, that's when God opened the doors. And I think that, honestly, this is something that I believed God would do, but it's also something that Jeff confirmed with us that it's very likely. And I use the term, from over the river, meaning people that are not members of Faith Baptist Church participating in making this dream come true. The very first person that gave was a precious lady from our television ministry, which I've never even seen in person, and she gave $25,000 to get this started. And we're gonna see more of that. We're gonna see people that are going to, that God's going to burden their hearts, and I think this thing's just gonna just keep plugging away and go forward.
Oh yeah, no, it's amazing. Another Jeff on our
Yeah.
staff uh, wrote a book, and it's called God Honors Movement, and it's that he's led a lot of campaigns as well, and it's that um, he's seen that in motion so many places. Is when
Yes.
churches move, when people move in faith, God will honor that.
Yes.
And that's just another example. I mean, that's a real example of that movement that
Yeah.
you guys did and God honoring. So before we wrap, I want to open the floor to you uh, to just ask. You know, you're talking to another pastor, a church leader that's maybe considering a capital campaign with Enjoy. What would you tell them that they could expect or they would experience maybe in the campaign and also just with Enjoy itself and your experience?
Okay, if I was going to speak with another pastor that was considering Enjoy, I would encourage them to do it. From a super, super practical standpoint, we own our property. I've never done this before. I've never tried to build a building or sought to build a building that was going to be millions of dollars. We currently, though it's crowded, everything's paid for. And from a super practical point of view, it made no sense to me uh, to not get advice from somebody who had done it 5,000 times and raised $5 billion when I've never done it. And I just couldn't put the church's, I guess, properties at jeopardy. I couldn't rationally understand that. To me, it was a super easy decision. I ran the numbers by some builders, I guess you'd say, there's some people in the church that what they do is they go around the country and build facilities specifically for certain purposes. And this one particular individual, he asked how much we were going to be charged, and he said, "Now, are they taking a percentage on top of that?" And I said, "No." He said, "That's a good deal." Well, I knew it was a good deal because I don't want to say how much it was because that might mess the video up because not everybody's going to be the same. I understand that.
Mhm.
But that amount of money that we paid is going to give me an answer. That amount of money is going to give me an answer of go ahead or you can't go ahead. If the answer is you can't go ahead, okay, it cost me that amount of money to make a wise decision to not put our facilities at risk. If the answer is go ahead, I can guarantee you that the amount of money that we're going to raise by using Enjoy is going to be far greater than that initial investment. And so it was an easy decision for me once I'd spoken with the guys from Enjoy and realized that they're spiritual. That's a big thing. That they're spiritual. This isn't just a company trying to make money. These are spiritual people who love the Lord, who really care, who really want God's will for your church. And so all those factors helped me make that decision and feel really good about it. Our church really got behind it. Um, were there any people against it? Well, I would have to guess in a church our size, there might have been someone who would say, "Why would you spend money to
Mhm.
raise money?"
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
the presentation that we gave to the church was good enough that and the way that I do things, the way I do things is when I'm making a difficult decision, I bring in the pastoral staff. If there's 100% agreement, I bring in the trustees. If there's 100% agreement, I bring it before the men. If there's 100% agreement, I bring it before the church. Well, nobody was uncomfortable enough about it to raise their hand, not even with all the men, and say, "I just don't like this." Not one person. So we had what appeared to be 100% unity, although I understand that you get it, right? Like in the hearts of some of those guys, there had to have been some doubt. Why would you spend money to raise money? Well, because you guys are good at it. You understand it. You've done the whole process. There's so many steps that Jeff helped us with. I would have never done. I wouldn't even have thought of it. So, and it involved lots and lots of great people in our
Yeah.
church. And that was also key. Just the whole process made it when I brought it before the whole church, although the campaign itself was only a month long. Now that's something that if you'd asked me, I'd have thought, no, that needs to be like 2 months long or something like that. But I told myself that no, if God's leading you to go with Enjoy, then you go with Enjoy. You listen to them and you do what they say because they have the experience. That's why you're spending this money. And so I trusted it. Um, and we went with it, maybe with our own little Faith Baptist flair in a couple areas,
Yeah.
um, but we went with it, and Jeff went with us on those particular things that we had that are unusual. And it and God blessed it, and He's still blessing it. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
So I would say
It's
do it.
incredible. Well, Pastor Chuck, let me tell you, it's very encouraging, to me personally, and I know it will be. The first people that are going to see this video when it's edited is going to be our staff. Um, to be able to hear your story, Faith Baptist Church's story, and just that bit at the end that's so encouraging to me is that you can see our heart as an organization. That this isn't just a business that we do. Um, we wake up every day and we talk to pastors and we talk about how we can move the vision forward. So it just honestly, from me to you, so encouraging. And thank you so much, not only for taking the time today, but also just to be transparent. And I know that's going to help the people on our staff hear that. Like, hey, we're making a difference. And it's through people like you and the vision that God's put in your heart. Um, just thank you so much. Well, I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
thank you
Awesome.
for letting me have a part in it.